So thank you very much for inviting me. Really appreciate it. I was wondering how I would start tonight, and then I remembered something that happened in the mid '80s, and I'm going to start with that. In around 1984 and 1985, I got a call from the chief executive officer of St. Luke's Medical Center asking me to go up to one of the medical floors and assist a team with teamwork. They were having some issues. So I said, sure, I'll go up and do that. And so I spent several days up on the floor, and I tried to fit in as best I could. I became kind of like an orderly for several days, talked with staff about their perceptions about what was going on. And then one night I worked swing shift, and they said, well, why don't you go and talk with some of the patients we have here on the floor? And that made a lot of sense to me. I like talking with people and listening. And they said, well, why don't you go into that room over there, because the person who's here, they were on vacation and one of them had a cardiac event. And so that's why they were on the telemetry floor. Anybody here in nursing? You can't? I will try. I will try. So they were on the telemetry floor. And so I went in and met with, just introduced myself. And it was the woman who had the cardiac event. They were both in their mid-80s, maybe not quite mid-80s, but they were definitely in their 80s. And she was in the bed, and he was in his mid-80s, but he looked like he could take you apart and break you like a twig. He was leaning against here, and he had the chest of, anybody follow football? He had the chest of a nose tackle. He still was in physically great shape. And so I forget how many years they were married, but it was a long time. So I said, terrific, I can get answers from experts about what did they do to make this marriage so successful? And so I asked him, what have you done to make this marriage go for such a long time and be successful? And this is what he said to me, and I'll try to repeat it. He leaned back and his hands were like this. He goes, I don't know, I just loved her. I said, well, sir, Mr. I forgot his name, could you be a little bit more specific? And he goes, I don't know, I just loved her. But what was fascinating was she was sitting with her head away from us. We were up in the front and she was in the back. She turned, and the look she gave him was one of absolute adoration. She looked at him with her eyes such that she thought that this was her Prince Charming, that this was her knight in shining armor. I have never seen eyes like that before. I have never seen eyes that showed love like that since. It was amazing. She didn't say a word, but her eyes said everything. They looked like pure love. She looked at him like, that man is my hero. I've never seen that since, and it was just beautiful to experience that. And so I left the room, and it was just amazing. That's the kind of marriage, that's the kind of relationship I think we all want, to have someone look at you like that with absolute wonderment in their eyes. And that's what it was. It was absolute wonder. Well, let's take it, and some of this I'll be repeating from what I did at the Psi Beta Club. A family system is made up of subsystems. It's made up of the executive subsystem, and I'm not going to write subsystem, executive. It's made up of the sibling subsystem. And if you have, this is the children, this is the husband and wife making decisions about how we spend our money. How do we budget our money? Where are we going to live? What jobs are we going to take? So if you have a sibling subsystem, so you have the parental subsystem. Now I turn around like this, it's going to be tough, but I do the best I can. You have the parental subsystem. And then you have the fourth subsystem. The marital subsystem. So how is this different than this? This is the boyfriend-girlfriend subsystem. So this is the parents setting limits on the children, encouraging them. If we have children, we want to do all we can to meet their needs, right? To make them feel they are worth something, to make them feel successful, to give them confidence. Fair statement? But sometimes, in some families, the parents can focus a bit too much on the parental subsystem, and they start to ignore the marital subsystem. Particularly, when we look at the first two stages of marriage. The first one is, well, we'll put it this way, is a symbiotic stage, which you know as the honeymoon stage or the romance stage. The second one is a differentiation stage. And this occurs between 6 months and 1 year after people get married. This is when people start to establish their own identities in the marriage, and the bloom starts to come off the rose. With me? There's an inside joke among counselors. These are the 3 stages. When you first get married, it's, I have no needs at all. I'm only here to meet your needs. The second stage is, you know, I still want to meet your needs, but I've got a few needs too. And the third stage, numero uno, baby. It's all about my needs, your needs. Who cares? That's this stage. Some couples may overfocus on this and tend to neglect this. Let me give you an example, and this is one of those I gave at the Psi Beta meeting. You may remember this, those who were there. Can't speak with us. Okay, so when I went on rides with the Chandler Police Department, which was at least twice a month, I did that so they would know me and would feel comfortable with me when there was a critical incident. Who's that guy? They knew who I was. And usually, almost always, the sergeant of that shift would assign me to a person to go riding. But one day, one of the older officers, and he was still new but older, he was in his early to mid 40s, said, "You're coming with me today." I said, "Okay, I'll go with you." And so we were about 5 minutes out from the station when he said, "See that manila folder there? Why don't you go open it up?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And in the folder was a picture of his wife. She had just come in second place in the Mrs. Arizona contest. This was in mid-90s, I guess. And there's a picture of their 2 children, 20, 21 years old, good-looking kids, the kind of kids you go, wow, those are good-looking men. And he told me they had just come back from Paris together, the whole family. And I said, wow, so what's going on? And he says, well, I'm really pretty sure I'm going to divorce my wife. And, you know, I'm a guy. I'm looking at this picture. I'm going, really? Does she have like the personality of an ogre? Because I don't know. And what he said to me was, I have no romantic feelings towards her. None. And so my brain started going. And so he gave me a hint with the introduction he gave me about his family, what was going on, or probably what was not going on. Do you remember what the hint was? What was the hint he gave me when he said what they had done? Where did they go? You do not take your children to Paris. I'm sorry. Strong bias. That is the one city you never take children to. Who's been to Paris? You do not take children to Paris. Maybe other cities, not that city. It is for lovers. Agreed?
I would say yes.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. So I asked him this question with that hint laid out to me. I said to him, and I forget his name, when was the last time you went on a date with your wife? Anyone care to guess? Oh, good. What do you think his last date with his wife was? Before the kids were born? That's correct. Once the children were born, and they're 20 and 21, they had never gone out on a date. And so I said to him, sir, or whatever his name was, how can you have romantic feelings towards your wife when you never do anything romantic with her? And the look of, I remember two things. One is that woman I described to you in the hospital. The other one I always will remember is the look of horror on his face when he told me that and when I said that. The look of horror like, oh my God, you're right. About 3 months later, I was another officer, and we were taking someone to Chandler Regional to get their blood tested for a DUI, and he was coming out of the hospital having done the same thing with a client. So I asked him, how's it going? And he goes, things are better. We're actually going on dates, and it really seems to be helping. Who knew? Another example. In 1992, I had just started practicing outpatient with St. Luke's. I had transitioned from inpatient, which is really different. And in comes a couple, and they were what we call emotionally disengaged. If you look at you see the flat line for hearts, right? And you don't want it to be flat. There was just no electricity. They were, I think, emotionally disengaged. And the session wasn't going well. And I finally said towards the end, have you ever considered taking walks together? And they looked at me like I had lost my mind. And I knew that had gone over like a lead balloon. And I said to myself, I will never see them again. I never did. I never saw them again. But I did see her. I had to attend a meeting for Chandler because I was the account executive. And in that meeting, there she was. And I saw her, but she didn't see me initially. But as the meeting broke up, she saw me, and she came over. And she said to me, just what I thought, she said, Mark, we thought that idea was the dumbest idea we have ever heard. But I said to my husband, you know what, let's try it. Why don't we try that? And what do you think happened? They started to have some connection. So the very first thing, what I'm sharing with you about relationships, particularly when you get into this stage, is this is really important. Sounds easy, doesn't it? You would think it is, but for so many people, they don't do it. What's an example of interaction? Tate? What else? Come on, what are some examples of interaction?
Asking them about their day.
Maybe, I would go.
Sharing a meal together.
Sharing a meal together, what else? Okay, so, yes, going for a walk, what else?
Roasting a movie together.
Watching a movie?
Roasting.
Roasting?
Yeah.
Cooking together?
No, like both criticizing the movie together, so you're like ripping off of each other and having fun?
Disagree, I would not say that. I would say cooking, but not, the word criticism makes my blood run, so.
Having shared hobbies.
Yes. Did everyone hear that? Having shared hobbies. Now, for example, Gloria and I work out 3 or 4 days a week. She does her thing, I do my thing. Is that interaction? No. Not at all. We unload the dishwasher like 3 times a week. Is that interaction? Yes, because we're working together as a team. We do jigsaw puzzles just consecutively. Is that interaction? Yes. We used to take walks. We've stopped doing it in the heat. We'll resume that when it gets a little bit cooler. But this, for whatever reason, seems to build a bond between people. So the first lesson I hope you take away is don't lose sight of this. It sounds unimportant, but it really is a critical skill to maintaining a relationship. Who here has fallen in love with somebody by doing chores or doing the bathroom or anything like that? Anybody here? No, probably not. What's another good interaction? Hiking is really good in this state. Hiking usually works. Any questions about that? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Okay, if one partner is more interested in than the other, does it seem to also have a positive effect over time?
Yes. I happen to like competitive sports a lot. I don't have to win, I just like competitive sports. Gloria doesn't even like to spell the word. Not going to go there. So we realized we had to come up with something that we both could do together. And we came up with canoeing. We're both avid canoeists. So she likes canoeing, but not as much as I do. But she does it because it is fun for her. It's just not as much fun as it is for me. So it was a compromise. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does it answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, I forgot. When you're married or when you're just living together and you have children, really recommend you go on a date every 2 weeks without the children, no kids. And someone said to me once, wouldn't that get expensive? And my response to that was, maybe, but if you think that's expensive, what do you think a divorce lawyer costs? Okay. So that's what we do want to do. I'm now going to go over some things you definitely don't want to do. And these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Do these. And the reason these start to show up is because in the differentiation stage, different needs start to surface. And there's conflict, almost always, which is normal, which is natural. So the first horseman is this. Criticism. Don't do it. An example of a criticism is, why do you always do it that way? Or, God, you never get that right. Those are all criticisms and significantly hurt the relationship. I once worked with a couple. They were originally from Mexico. He had become a flight attendant for American Airlines. He was very critical of his wife, very critical. And we talked about that, and I discussed this. And he said, what about constructive criticism? I said, do I hear the word criticism? Well, yeah, then don't do it. Not okay. Now, what criticism is, think about this real carefully. We're telling someone they're doing something wrong, right? Which means, but what are we really saying underneath that? What's really that we want? The person who's being critical is usually saying something like, this is what I want. But instead of saying, this is what I want from you, it's going to come out as a criticism. Just consider that. Ask for what you want. Don't be critical at all, ever. Any questions about that?
Can you give us an example
Of
like instead of saying something critical, say instead what you want?
why do you load the dishes that way in the dishwasher? I don't know. I just don't think that's right. I think that's just dumb doing it that way. A valid thing to say might be, you know what, I would really like you if you would consider doing it this way. That would make sense to me. This is what I want. And you have a right then, the person getting that message, to say, that may be what you want, but it's not the way I want. So you would compromise with that. If you're critical, the conversation will go nowhere. Does that help? The next one, if someone is critical, if someone experiences criticism, what will they usually become after they've been criticized? It starts with a D. That's right. Defensive. And that's probably not helpful at all. By the way, I might say, well, I'll wait before I give that next bit. So that's what usually happens. The third horseman is this. Stonewalling. Stonewalling is when someone says, I don't want to talk about it. Or okay. Women tend to be more critical than men. Men tend to stonewall much more than women. And the final horseman, and when this shows up, usually the marriage is heading for divorce. Contempt. You're just like your mother. Can't you do anything right? Oh my God, what a loser. You think that doesn't occur? It does. That's what we say in our field, there's a malignancy in the relationship and it's probably not going to work. There's too much of this. So any questions about these? Maria, that was a real good clarification on that. Yeah, please.
At what point in this process is it clear that it won't work, and how does the people within the relationship come to that decision?
Clear to them or clear to me?
Well, no, because it's always made clear to the person on the outside, but clear to the people within the relationship.
That's a great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for that. I think it varies from person to couple as to how that's received and when they know. I would think most couples, if there's high frequency of conflict and the conflict's occurring all the time and the kids are experiencing conflict all the time, that I think most people would know it's time to maybe we have to look at other options here. If the conflict is consistently and it's frequent. By the way, I might add, it brings up something I forgot. The greatest gift you can give your children is a strong marriage, bar none. That's the greatest gift you give your kids. If you don't put energy into it, I think that's going to be problematic, because we know that from research that it takes kids at least about 2 years to adjust to a marriage due to the grief and the loss. However, if they're living in a home with a tremendous amount of conflict and or abuse, we also know that it's better for the kids to exit and that marital relationship to end in that situation. So to this point, any questions? Yes?
I'm curious, do you see this pattern outside of marital relationships as well, like any sort of relationship?
I see it predominantly I did see it predominantly in marriages. I didn't see it so much in sibling relationships. I didn't see it like when I work with families in terms of working some things out that didn't have to do with the marital system. I didn't see it much. I definitely saw it in marriages. So what's the antidote to the 4 horsemen right here?
Enough copies, but if you would
Yeah, I'm not good at technical stuff. I'll have someone else take the picture.
With their phone, so as it goes by them, go ahead and hand them out, we won't have enough, but someone can take, they can take a picture of it.
Okay. Here you go. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Anybody know?
Right now,
Good. Thank you.
do you want me to move the mic up top so you don't hit it?
Good? Okay. So how many people didn't get one? Okay. So if you look at this list, you'll see there are categories. This list was derived by John Gottman, and how he arrived at these repairs, and you can see they're in different categories, is at the University of Washington, where he started out with his wife. He had an apartment with video machines, microphones, the whole works, and couples would come there to live for a week. Couple after couple. He did this for several years. And so what you're seeing here is not something that he came up with, really. From his observations, this is what successful couples use when they start to go down this road and they make things better. Right here. So you want to use these, and each couple has some that they use more than the others, right? But you want to use these for sure. They're very, very effective. Any questions about these? Which ones do we use? My favorite, the one I use the most is, I'm sorry, I blew that. That hurt my feelings. Find the ones that fit right for you and then start using them. Yes? Yes, that's a good one. Yeah, we do.
Like a lot gets swept under the rug with that one.
Yes, to a point. But that's a good question. And my response to that was, sometimes discussions get very heated, meaning each person is flooded with emotions. And when we're flooded with emotions like anger, nothing good's going to happen. So then you could say, let's agree to disagree, and let's go to our separate corners. So let's just calm down and re-meet about this in, say, an hour. To do that, the system is getting rid of some of the adrenaline that's building up and some of the anger, so things can talk more calmly.
I see, so it's a stop action, like it says. It's
Right.
not a negotiation point.
Yeah, but sometimes we just agree to disagree and leave it. That's true too. We do that. It seems to work. We'll have to agree to disagree, and you go on from there.
So you have to ask yourself if it really matters.
That's a great point. Does everyone hear what Mia's saying? Can you?
Some things just don't matter. We give credence to things that don't really matter in the end. You know, so you have to ask yourself, how important is this thing we're arguing about to our marriage? And sometimes you'll find that it's not that big Pick your battle, exactly.
And I think that's just so important, what you're just saying, and totally agree with that. All right, so the next concept is also important, and one that a lot of counselors, colleagues just don't take into account enough. Well, we won't use the word problems. We'll use the word perpetual issues. Those are problems or issues that will never, ever be resolved. 69% of couples have perpetual issues. They're not going to be solved. What becomes important is not that you have to solve them, but the successful couples, the ones who deal with this and marriages go on, like that couple that from the medical center is, what's important is the affect around the perpetual issue. Is there a lot of anger? Is there criticism? Or do you learn to laugh about it? Do you learn to accept the other person being different than you? That's really important. Can you give me some examples of universal perpetual issues? Issues that there's always going to be some differences between couples, perhaps.
In-laws?
Yes, yes. An in-law might come with disparaging, and you just have to learn to deal with that. It's an issue, and it's never going to change.
It's not an issue, but you pretty much have this religion.
Yeah, Tatum is saying, people who were at the sci-fi meeting know I'm Jewish, and my wife isn't just Catholic, she's a devout Catholic. I mean, for our 50th anniversary, I'm taking her, I hope, God willing, to Rome so she can be finally in the Vatican and Sistine Chapel. I mean, I've probably been to more masses than any Jew who walks the earth. The reason I say that is when we go on vacation, she will dutifully go to Mass on Sunday. There is no way in this world I'm letting her go to Mass in a strange church by herself. I'm going with her, which she's fine. Or I'll go with her if it's Christmas or Easter and there's no one to go with her, I will go with her so she's not alone. My dad says, well, I guess you're no longer Jewish. I said, Dad, that's nothing to do with it. I'm going because my wife, I don't want her to be alone. So that's an example of a perpetual issue. I'm not going to become Catholic and she's not becoming Jewish, believe me. What's another perpetual issue?
Disciplining children.
What about parenting styles?
Yes, that's a great one. This gentleman said parenting styles can be a perpetual issue. Those, if we can, need to be worked out as best you can because you don't want the kids to play off one against the other. Or if they try it, and they will, you know to interrupt that. You bad girl. Take a time out. That's a great issue, but that needs to try to work on that, right? Another one, just about this, you stole right out of my head. You said finances. One person's a saver, one person is a spender. That's a perpetual issue. You try to compromise if you can, or you learn to deal with that. What's another one?
Cleanliness.
Yeah, thank God that's not our, yes, cleanliness, that's right. Another one is libido. One person may have a high libido, a high sex drive, and one person may not. And you have to learn to deal with that and adjust to it. You go, well, it's a big deal. So those are all perpetual issues. And remember, it's not the issue so much, it's the affect you have when you're dealing with the issue. Is there anger, or you just start to laugh about it and do your best with it and accept the other person? Any questions about that? Because it's really important. That was a good one about the parenting, too. It really was. Okay, that's what's next. Whoop.
Back to how do you
That's right.
How do you know what is something you should avoid? What's a red flag, in other words?
A red flag, like the issue it may not work between.
It might be too hard to have a relationship based on, or this is per couple.
I think it depends on each couple. I mean, for us, I think religion took 30 minutes to work out, and that was it. We were done. Because she felt very strongly about her Catholicism. I went, yeah, you know, it's not that big a deal to me. That was it. Her feelings carried it. But in other cases, that may not be the case, and both may have equal feelings about religion. And maybe one person is unyielding. We're going to be my religion. That's the way it is. The other person then starts to feel like they're being controlled, feels powerless.
What do you do about the children in that case?
Well, let's go back to what Mia said. We'll come back to that. I think when you're in the symbiotic stage and the honeymoon, and you're in love, those issues may not surface. They may very well surface after you've been living with each other and you're in that stage where, hey, you know, I've got needs here too, and this is important to me. But if you can talk about that and get to a deeper part of the relationship, I think there's a better chance that you'll see that may be, like one person wants kids, one person doesn't want kids. And you talk about that, that may be a deal breaker. But sometimes it doesn't surface to that differentiation stage. And then you have to deal with that as best you can. In terms of the kids, you're asking what?
If you're two different religions, how do you work that out?
For us, my kids were raised Catholic because it meant a lot to Gloria. The only thing I said is they will not be altar boys. That ain't happening. And I put my foot down on that for obvious reasons. But it was important to her, and so I'm in love with her. I want to make sure that it was that important. I said, fine, as long as the other didn't occur. And she was okay with that. But I know for a fact, I know some people, religion, I will tell you a very sad story. I had the same roommate for 4 years in college. Steve was very Jewish. His father was more Jewish. And it was our junior year. At the end of junior year, Steve's father said to Stephen, because they were heading towards marriage, they were like two peas in a pod. Ellen, we just had dinner with her last Wednesday in Tucson. They were like two peas in a pod. They were perfect for each other. And Steve's father said to him, if you marry Ellen, you're no longer my son. And Steve dropped Ellen. Dropped her. It was heartbreaking to see. I've never forgiven, and Steve's dad has passed. And what happened was Ellen got married, and their marriage ended in divorce. She had two very fine kids. Steve was married, twice. Neither marriage lasted. But somehow they found each other again after the second divorce, Steve's second divorce, and wound up marrying. And ironically, when both of Steve's parents got liver cancer, Ellen, who was a nurse, tended to them. You talk about someone who had forgiveness in her heart. It's Steve's ultimate responsibility. He went along with his dad. It's on him. But the father had, I can't even get going on that. It just still pisses me off. Steve died about 4 years ago, even more than that now, 6 years ago of a heart attack. And I still keep in touch with Ellen, but at least they had like 15 years together. So I was really grateful for that. But that was heartbreaking in terms of religion being something that kept those two apart. And Meshuggah and Steve went along with it. Oh, my Lord. It is sad. It's very, very sad. Yes?
It seems like a perpetual issue can persist in good nature if we're able to communicate what we want and don't move it into the criticism stage.
Yes.
Is that fair?
we have some perpetual issues that will never change. And we try not to be critical about it, and we try to do some acceptance stuff with that. And it's just not going to change, probably. And I'm not talking about religion either. So I think did everyone hear what this gentleman said? Because it's really important. Could you say that again? Because I think it's really valid.
Yeah, that perpetual issue can persist in good nature as long as we're able to communicate what we want rather than move into the criticism stage.
Yeah, and I can't overemphasize what he's saying. That's very, very important, really important. So I want to go on to the next concept. Any questions about that, though? Yes.
About the perpetual issues, at what point can you clearly distinguish boundaries and like whether it's the issue that's the issue or the way that someone's reacting to the issue that's the issue? You know, for example, someone who's not emotionally healthy or you know may react to certain things that really aren't issues.
Yeah, I mean, in other words,
and that would be an issue in and of itself, right? Like is there like a clear? I don't know how I want to word
well,
it.
I think I hear what you're saying. Like, are you saying? Let me ask you, that there are some issues in each of our, maybe in someone's past, who comes into the marriage that are not fully resolved, and they bring it into the marriage, and no matter what you do, they're going to become defensive, or
At a certain point, it's like, where do we draw the line between like, okay, I take responsibility for the way that I feel about what you're doing versus, you know, you're making me feel this way.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, you know, anybody could say this makes me feel a certain way about anything. You know, I could come in here and throw a hissy fit because you put the remote on the table there, and really it means nothing. You know, unless I say it means something. It's like,
Right.
Like how do we define like healthy boundaries in terms of that? Like, you know, or even have, because I know sometimes in like relationships, and I've had it happen in my past where it's like you go into a relationship and it starts out slow, and like these things just start to happen, and you know it compounds like and then it becomes.
I definitely hear what you're saying. I'm just kind of wrestling right here with an answer for it. I mean, you've said it really well. I'm not sure I have a great answer for you on that. I guess my fallback would be, as best as you can, is to dialogue that and to talk about it.
That's probably where the counseling comes in.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. To talk about it and to really listen. Because if someone feels heard, I think that helps to reduce the temperature and make the conversation go better. If you're blowing it off and it goes to, as this gentleman said, criticism, good luck with that.
Yeah.
So I think the more we listen to our partner, and you said, because I can tell you can talk about your feelings, but this is making me really kind of uncomfortable. I don't want to criticize you, but I'm not sure what to do with this right now. I think that's valid. As long as you talk about your feelings. You know, it's the old thing, I'm sure we've all seen this. When you fill in the blank, when you attack me, I feel, or when you criticize me, I feel attacked. And so what's the third line would be, I need you to do whatever it is you want them to do. Now, they may not say, well, you may want it. You ain't getting it. That's not happening. But then you can take it from there. When you say that, I just feel dismissed. As long as you can stay with your feelings and not blame, the discussion has a chance. As soon as you start criticizing or blaming, good luck with that. Does that kind of make sense? That's what I think we have a responsibility to do, as this gentleman said, to own our own shit, our own feelings, our own stuff. Right? But that's a great point. And I hadn't thought about that. Any other questions about that? Did that answer your, I'm sorry, your first name is? Yeah. Does that, Paul, did that make sense? I really agreed with that. Did you feel like is there anything more you want to comment about that?
Yeah, my name's Ross.
Ross, I'm sorry, my bad.
That's okay.
Anything else on that you want to add?
No, thank you for elaborating.
Okay. Because that was really,
I would say at the end of when you, I, and I need, there should be a fourth one in there that says, I will.
that's great. That's right, I left that out. Did everyone hear Ross? Let's put that in. Doesn't make sense. Left it out. And I left it out because I'm not sure I considered that, ever. That's a great statement. Okay, so let me go on to this concept. Is anyone starting to feel overwhelmed? Am I giving out too much information or too fast? Is this making sense so far? I just need some feedback. Okay, good, yes. There was a hand back there. I saw it.
What's your opinion on couples who, they start to say those phrases, but they start to say it more passive aggressively, like, well, I feel this, and like, okay, fine, I'll do this, but
Well, there was a one thing before that, but let's get to that right now. Hang on, we'll go to that. That is a great, you talk about a great lead-in. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, your first name is?
It's Bridget.
Bridget. What you're talking about, kind of, is this. Meta messages. They will kill a marriage. There are the words, the content of what you say, but it's more important how you say it. For example, and this actually happened in our marriage towards the beginning when I was truly an idiot. Here it is. Here it is. This is, I'm going to use the same words, different meaning. I'll take out the garbage. What does that mean? I'm going to take out the garbage, right? But what does this mean? I'll take out the garbage. What does that mean?
I do not want to take
I don't want it out. I'm playing the martyr. You're a lazy, but I'll do it again, right? It's a different, same words, different meaning. That's kind of what you're hinting at, is the meta message. The words that are said are short-circuited by how it was said. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Here's another meta message. Remember I told you about the couple, he was an airline flight attendant, right? He was very, very controlling about money. Very controlling. She didn't bring in money, she raised the kids, and he brought in the money. He was very controlling. What is the meta message with that behavior towards his wife? Yeah, and? That's right. He doesn't trust her with the money, and she heard that loud and clear. I don't trust you with the money. So, and that was probably the thing I think that was prompting her to really consider divorce, that one right there. Yes?
I think it also goes to he doesn't value what she's doing.
Yes, again. She felt devalued. She felt dismissed. And I recommended that he be seen in individual counseling. Just as a general practice, I would rarely see a couple and then see one of them individually. That's not a good paradigm to do. And if a couples therapist wanted to do that, I would not suggest seeing that couples counselor at all. So, but he really needed some individual work. My guess is that marriage was not going to be saved. That's just my hunch. Because I left practice while I had to refer them out. Any questions about meta messages? Okay, next concept is In discussions, when you're having a disagreement or conflict, what's an example of a harsh startup?
Listen up.
There's one. That's right.
You're not listening.
There's another one. That's a criticism, right?
I have something to say.
That depends. If you said, I've got something to say, blah. If you said, honey, I've got something to say, and I'd appreciate it if we could talk about it, that would be a softened startup. Successful marriages, no surprise here, use this. Again, that comes from John Gottman's work in The Apartment, softened startups versus hard startups. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But remember, there are three types of people in marriages. There's the validator, there is the conflict avoider, and then there is the volatile personality. And the volatile personality tends to hook up with which person? The avoider. So I'm from New York originally, and so we let it rip. And I've had to really work on of toning down my startups and not just using harsh, but to come on too strong. I've really had to work on that with Gloria, who's from Arizona, and it's not her family's style. So just be aware of how you start discussions. It's really important. Any questions about that? Hey, what else?
I have a question. Are there harsh startups statements that are non-dependent on the meta messaging? In other words, I'll give you an example. It didn't matter how she said it. Whenever my wife said to me, "Can we talk?" I mean, she could say it as soft as possible, but whenever I heard those words, I feared. I struck
Yeah.
So are there messages like that might be harsh startups no matter how they're said?
Well, when you said you kind of started to fear that, can we talk? My guess, my hunch would be that you would be on the receiving end of criticism.
This was my ex-wife, and yeah, usually.
There's a great episode of Seinfeld that goes into that. I don't. I'm not. Yeah, harsh startups often are led off by criticism, or your tone of voice is just very kind of demeaning and harsh. That's the way I can put it. So I think the answer to the question is yes.
Can I interject something about tone of voice?
Yeah.
Sometimes, well, I don't know how my husband's lived with me for so long, it's been 37 years, but he tells me sometimes, he'll say, "Be nice." I'm like, what do you, I thought it would be nice. Sometimes we need to be aware of the way we sound. And he'll say, "Well, you sounded angry." And I should say, "Gee, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way." But now I'm like, no, I wasn't. Like we have to I got defensive, which is, not good. So sometimes we're not aware of how we sound. So we need to listen to feedback and say, well, it sounded to me like you were angry or you used a sharp tone. And we should say, be aware of it and say, I'm sorry, I'll, try to do that. Or something, I don't know.
And I agree. I mean, I think Mr. Counselor here certainly can get angry inappropriately, and I have to calm myself down. And sometimes I don't do a good job of that. I just don't, because of my own issues that I went to therapy for. Those issues can still surface, and my Gloria can touch a nerve, and I'm off to the races, and I have to do the best I can to calm myself down. And sometimes it's hard for me. It really is. That's why I'm taking her to Rome, because she's a hero for doing up with me. Two concepts. Yes, go ahead.
What if you approach it in a soft tone, but they still behave defensively?
I apologize. I couldn't.
What if you approach it in a soft tone, but they behave defensively?
Boy, that to me, that's a challenge, and I think if it were me, I'd probably be going, you still seem like you're defensive. I'm trying to say this as gently as I can to you. What's making you when you say it that way, it comes across as defensive to me, like you're not hearing me as much as I would like. Can you help me understand why you're being maybe defensive right now? If someone is doing that, and I'm sorry, your first name is? Jaime. My guess is that there's been some stuff going on before that relationship with you that she still may be dealing with or dealing with. So I would try to be as gentle as I can and say, how can I put this to you in a way that would make you really want to hear what I'm saying? What would work for you for me to say it? How can I say this? Give me some help with this, because this is what I don't want you to be defensive, and I see you as that, and I must be, how can I say it to you? Because it's important to me to be able to, for you to hear me. Does that fit? I'm not sure that's great, but it's the best I can do right now, I think. Two more things. First is everyone here has a bank account, right? Right? Well, you also have a relationship account, whether you know it or not. And it's really important to make deposits into your relationship account. Like for me, for Gloria, when I put gas into her car, I'm making a relationship deposit. When if she cooks dinner, almost always I'm going to clean the pots and pans. She ain't touching them. That's a deposit. Everyone that you have a relationship with, there's something that you can do that's going to be a relationship deposit. You want to make more deposits than you do withdrawals. What's an example of a universal withdrawal? Do this and it's a withdrawal into your account. What's a universal withdrawal? Starts with a C and ends with an M. What was that? Criticism. That's a universal withdrawal. Don't do it, ever. Ever. So couples who we were seeing as counselors, their relationship account is usually overdrawn, just like your bank account. There's been too much criticism and not enough deposits. Make deposits. Finally, can anyone guess, this is it, can anyone guess, and this is cross cultures, almost all cultures, the behavior that if you do it is always going to be, how do I put this? Helpful to the relationship, always, and it's not sex. What's the behavior across, and I didn't get it, I wasn't even close. What's the behavior, do you think, that if you do it, it really brings the couples closer together, and again, it's not sex? Gratitude? No, it's a behavior.
Hugs. Hugs. Is it listening?
Boy, you're close. You're close. It's in that direction.
Listening. Kissing. Those are affectionate.
You're both close. The behavior, in this, John Gottman talked about this, and he was shocked. It's cross-cultural, not just ours, but almost all cultures. The behavior is cuddling. I didn't make this up. It's cuddling. In bed, when you go to sleep, cuddle with each other, or cuddle when you're not asleep. Cuddling releases endorphins in couples and makes people feel a lot better. It's also universal closeness. So if you want to strengthen your relationship, keep cuddling. And I'm not making that up. Any questions?
I have a question. So when it comes to like cuddling, that dynamic, you have the opposite end where, let's say, a partner wants intimate relationship, right? You want to give more intimate.
You mean sex?
Yes, sex. We're not sex.
Sorry, shouldn't use that word. Sorry.
Your partner says, I don't feel like having sex. What about the opposite? Your partner says, cuddling, oxytocin. The other partner says, I don't want to cuddle. No oxytocin for me, please. Don't.
And the person is consistently not wanting to do any of that?
I guess it's more just like if you're having a perpetual issue of one partner wanting to cuddle more often than the other partner wants to cuddle.
Yeah, I'd kind of want to work that out. That's a big perpetual issue, right? I mean, Are there some things that maybe the person who wants to cuddle does that could get the other person more interested in cuddling? We know from research that women will have sex just in order to be held, to be cuddled. They're not really interested in sex, but they want to be cuddled more than men. And that's not a misogynistic statement. That's again from the research. It's that important. So, yes. Boom.
That being said, cuddling being so important, I think personal hygiene is so important.
No, wait, go ahead.
Wanting to smell good, I don't know how some women put up with some men that don't smell so good. Amen. People, it's really important. Smell good, take care of yourself, and personal hygiene, it's so attractive. And it's so unattractive when someone doesn't take care of their personal hygiene.
You got a lot of amens right here. You got the whole row agreeing with you. I agree. And I'm going to go way back to the beginning when I talked about making sure you're spending time together. That's very, very important. But what makes this a tricky thing to balance is, yes, you've got to spend time with your spouse, but you also need time for yourself because you have to be interesting to bring that into the relationship. Like Gloria goes into her art room and does art, sewing art, and she's gone because that makes her an interesting person. And I do chess, a lot of chess. But we each have our interests, but we also know we have to do things together to balance that out. It's really important. But personal hygiene, that goes under making yourself, if you neglect that aspect of the relationship, what you're saying is you're starting to take the relationship for granted. That's not good. You have to be interested in the relationship. Does that make sense? So it may sound funny, but I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. So I'll tell you of two things. I'll finish up with this. And this is one of the funniest things I've experienced and one of the saddest in the same instance. So I had to take a course in 1995, a vocational testing course to get my license, which I never used. I would never use it. But I took it, and during the course at Phoenix College, it was all day Saturday, we had to write an autobiography. I have no idea why in a vocational testing course. So everyone in that class, which was pretty crowded, knew I was married. I'd been married for about 20 years at that time. And so fast forward, it's the last day of class, and he's going to give a final exam. I could have gotten a J and passed the course. It was really easy. And so there's the break between a little bit more lecture and the test. And so we have this break. And I'm pacing up and down. There's this like this space that almost this large. I'm pacing up and down because I want out of there because Gloria and I got a date that night. And so in that class was a very nice man. He was a reverend. We called him Reverend Bob because that was his name, Reverend Bob. And every Saturday, his wife, Reverend Bob's wife, and their two small children would come in and bring him lunch, right? That's great. So I'm pacing up and down. And as I'm pacing, because I want out of there, here comes Reverend Bob up to me, and he goes, Mark, what's the matter? You're pacing. I go, I've got a hot date tonight. I want out of here. And he goes, a hot date? I thought you were married. I am. It's with my wife. That was funny and sad at the same time, that I can't have a hot date with my wife. I mean, so I always remember that. And she's still hot, by the way. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you a picture. So let's end with this. This is actually true. Those who were at the Psi Beta meeting might remember this. So, we had to take continuing education credits. And when this man came to town, if you did couples therapy, you went. He was like number 1 or number 2 on the credibility list. He was very well known, very influential. And he said, when you take a social history or a sexual history, you never take it together with the people. You always do it separately. And he gave this example of why you do it separately. So into his office comes a couple. And the presenting problem was that the man thought that his wife, he thought He thought his wife was having an affair. She worked for, at least on her paper it said that she worked for the International Monetary Fund. And he thought for sure she was having an affair because she always traveled. Now she was really traveling. He wanted to leave Washington to get a fresh start, and she refused to leave Washington. No way, it ain't happening. And they've always had a great sexual relationship. Down it was going. And so he was convinced that they were having an affair. So after he meets with him, in another session, he meets with her. And she does not work for the International Monetary Fund. She works for the CIA. He never knew that. And at that time, I saw him in 2017, so this is about 29, 28. She worked for the Covert Action Department of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Covert Action Department. And at that time, there were 17 people in the Covert Action Department. Of those 17 people, 7 were assassins. Of those 7, 3 were women. She was one of them. He never knew that. He never knew it. She had kept it a secret. And, and she said to him, you know, you're right, I am trying to have an affair, but it's a fake affair. My assignment, or as he said, she related to him that her current assignment was to get someone in bed in Monaco and kill him. And he asked the question that Jamie Curtis asked in the movie True Lies, have you ever killed anyone? And she said, yes, they all deserved it. True, quote for quote. So when you think about the movie Long Kiss Goodnight, and it's true. They are there, at least 3 of them. So that's all. I hope, any questions before we close? I hope it was interesting. Any questions? Yes.
What's your opinion on dealing with people who use like weaponized incompetence, who like maybe with chores or something like that, like they do it wrong on purpose, so the other partner will do that, and then it kind of turns into the other partner like basically.
I don't understand.
Let's say one partner doesn't want to load the dishwasher, and so they'll kind of do it incorrectly, like they'll put the plates and stuff in wrong.
Oh, the guy who doesn't want to do the dishwasher is passive aggressive again, right?
And then the wife will have to, she'll say, oh, I'll just do it. And so then she ends up doing all the chores and stuff. But then she kind of ends up becoming like a mother because she has to tell them, like, can't you just do this? But if you keep doing it wrong, like, how do you recommend dealing with that before it becomes meta messages being like, fine, I'll do it, you know?
Yeah, that to me, if that is an issue that comes up, that's a time for a major discussion about that's just, you're right, that's passive aggressive behavior needs to be dealt with either as a couple or in session. Those are like power dynamics going on. And I talk about it with them. I mean, he has every right to say, I don't want to do, and I'm not going to do the dishwasher. I'm not going to do it. And she has every right to go, okay, that's cool. I'll do it. Or she could say, well, here's the story. I'm getting tired of always doing the dishwasher. And you don't have to do it, but I'm not willing to continue in this relationship with that dynamic between us. Now, that's different if she says, if you're telling me you want to do the dishwasher a certain way and I'm not okay with that, then we have to work that out. That's okay. Don't be passive aggressive about it or do that. Let's talk about the way you want to do it and the way I want to do it. That's different than the former that I said. Does that make sense? Like in our relationship, I tended to always load the dishwasher along, right? But Gloria, she would start to redo it. This is the way she wants it done. So I said, I cleared the table, brought the stuff in, and I said, you load it. That's fine. I have no problem with that. And she had no problem with that either. She loads the dishwasher. I may bring it in, I put it there on the counter, and she loads it. She's okay with it, and I'm okay with it. And if I do the dishwasher, it's not going to be correct. I don't do it. That's all. Yeah.
unspoken expectations lead to resentment?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. It's good to lay those out there. Anything else on that? Does that fit for you?
Yeah.
You got to talk about those expectations.
I know.
If you don't tell me what you want, how can I know to give them to you?
Yes.
You gotta read my mind.
And just like that, you have to read my mind. No, 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 I'm not reading minds. That's not good. Yes?
There is an app on everybody that you can get. It's the Gottman card decks. So they have like date stuff that you can do and ways to talk to people and stuff. That's kind of similar to the checklist.
So you've read some of Gottman's work?
Oh yeah,
Comments, thoughts about it?
I've like Gottman a lot.
Yeah, there are so many people who write books on marriages, right? Any book by John Gottman isn't what he thinks or what may be, it's all research-based. You cannot go wrong with a book by John Gottman and his wife. It's all based on research. So in sum, the last thing I would tell you is to talk about the issues in a kind and caring way, but as you move on through your relationship, interaction as a couple is really important. Don't stop doing it ever. That's it.